guys, welcome to Conversations with Carrie. I'm so excited because we got some new guests today and we're talking Proverbs 32 woman. So stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome back to Conversations with Carrie. As you see, we have some special guests today and we are going to continue our conversation on Proverbs 32 woman. So this is part 3. So I have Jarrell and Antonio here, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves so you can get to know them a little bit.
My name is Antonio Case. I've been married for about just over 10 years to my wife Ashley. We have 4 kids, 5-year-old and then 3-year-old triplets. So we were married for about 5 years before we had our first child. So we're now along that journey.
Okay.
Awesome. My name is Jarrell McIntyre, so I'm married to my wife Adrian. We also have been married for, this will be 10 years in November. We're actually just a few months behind the Cases here. We have 2 children and 1 on the way. So I've got a 8-year-old Isaiah, got a 5-year-old daughter named Nia, and then my son Josiah will be here in December. So really excited about that.
Excellent. And I go to church with these guys, so I thought, what better way to talk about a Proverbs 32 woman than to have some guys from the church? All right, guys, so we're going to dive right in.
All right.
So I want to first know, what do you think of when you think of a Proverbs 31 woman?
Wow. Well, so for me, I think there's a lot there, right? So when I think about a Proverbs 31 woman, I think, you read the scripture and there's a lot of, it feels like to me there's a lot of to-dos.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Like it's a checklist of, hey, there's a lot of to-dos, there's a lot of stuff there. But I think about, for me, really the person behind all of that stuff.
Okay.
Right? So I think about the intentions of my wife or the intentions of myself and how that stuff plays out and how somebody is as a deed, right? Because it can look different from household to household. I don't know that it's a standardized checklist that you should have on the refrigerator, like you ain't doing this, you ain't doing that,
Right. Your punishment. No.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think very similarly. When I think about a Proverbs 31 woman, I think there's a lot there. Namely, a virtuous woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what kind of everyone takes from it.
yeah.
What I look at when I see that is, to me, virtue speaks of purity, it speaks of a beauty, but not so much an outward or external beauty, which is important also. I mean,
Right.
we want you
Let's
to
keep it
look
real.
right. But even more so than that, because beauty is passing and fleeting, right? It's a beauty that starts on the inside rather than starting on the outside. And I think today that's a very interesting thing, because what the culture says is that beauty is all about what's on the outside.
Yeah.
But when we look at from a Proverbs and from a biblical standpoint, beauty that's spoken of when you read this chapter, many of those qualities that are mentioned there are internal things. And I think it starts there, and then it allows that woman to be gracious and be trustworthy and be willing to put her hand to the plow and be a companion and be a partner. Whatever that means, like you said, from household to household. She's allowed herself to be conditioned according to what God is asking, as opposed to what the culture and everything else is saying.
I don't actually interpret Proverbs 31 as just for my wife.
Okay.
I actually interpret that as, we're actually supposed to be the bride of Christ, and there's a balance to this thing. So you may rise early, but I may rise early.
Okay.
Because it depends on what we need. Like, so my daughter, for example, my daughter's allergic to a lot of stuff. Well, that's both of our responsibility. I don't think that's my wife got to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make
Right.
sure we pack a special lunch for my daughter. I think that there's a part where we kind of intertwine and we balance.
Okay.
And I actually interpret that as, hey, this isn't a checklist for you. This is who we're becoming to him together.
Absolutely. So you brought up some really good points, and I think, especially as a single woman, a lot of times you feel almost pressured to be a certain kind of way. And I go to church with amazing women, and sometimes I'm like, that's not me. Like, and I think also we get caught up in culture. So you brought up like the culture with beauty, and I think about like, to be honest, like Instagram, everybody's like, showing a different side of themselves.
Yeah.
And Jarrell, you brought up like to-do lists. It sounds like we're supposed to be like this busy, amazing woman with this itty bitty waist. Like, like what? Where did that come from? Or how
Yeah.
do you respond to that even in your lives?
Looking at this too, the thing I love about what God, the way God lays things out for us is that it's like an equal opportunity for everyone, right? It's attainable. So if the world says beauty is defined on a 1 to 10 scale, right? Because that's what we do. Man, bro, what do you think? She's about 7, she's about 8, or the girls get together and they
we
do
rate
that,
too.
right?
Yep.
So we rate based on this scale, but everybody's not going to be a 10 on the outside. So where does that leave you if maybe you're not, right?
Right.
But the beautiful thing about God is that when you read Proverbs 31 and you look at the qualifications, they're there for the taking for anybody.
Yeah.
And anybody can be a 10, regardless of how you would be rated otherwise. And so when I look at that, I love that about this, because we have to, I think it's important to get away from defining ourselves a certain way.
Yeah.
Because when we define ourselves by the standard that he set, it's not easy. If you read those qualifications, they're not easy, but they are doable because of his empowerment.
Yeah.
And then we take a lot of pressure off of ourselves to try and feel like, well, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to look like this, we got to. All of that stuff is really an ungodly pressure, I think, that's being pushed upon women that I believe would be awesome for them to be free from.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually want to just piggyback on when you talk about the scale. The thing that's interesting to me is, so as my wife and I went through this journey, one of the things that I had to pray was, God, you have to help me reprogram how I think about and how I see women. Because I have a lot of bad habits, and I've grown up and I've got this context of my scale, right? I'm here, there's the scale, there's this. And, it's interesting, Carrie, because the best thing that I think the Lord can do for us is help us to see each other as he sees them.
Yes.
So then the scale becomes his scale and not, now I think my wife is easy on the eyes.
Right.
So, and Lord, I
Agreed.
thank you for that. Right? So I think she's easy on the eyes, but, I'm not just looking externally. As I started to actually walk with the Lord, and as we've gotten married, that stuff has changed.
Yeah.
My wife, physically has changed, just giving birth.
Yeah.
I think emotionally has changed. She's grown. I'm not actually married to the same person I married 10 years ago.
Totally
And
true.
so
Okay.
I have to constantly stay in tune with who is she becoming, who do you define her as. And it makes it a lot easier, right? Because I'm not looking at a scale like, oh, you used to look like this and now you look like, and she's not doing the same thing for me. I hope.
Right.
thank God.
I done put on a few pounds myself.
No, not just been eating.
I've been eating, right? So I ain't missed no meals. But,
Yeah, and I think it's important for the ladies, to see yourselves that way. And when you're looking for a mate, to look for someone that sees the same way that you see.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get on that.
All right.
Okay, since you brought it up.
Uh-oh.
I would say for my brothers and my sisters,
Okay.
like for us that are single and we desire marriage, like what advice would you give? Better yet, let's back it up a second. When did you realize, like, yes, I want to get married? Like, this is something I feel like I'm ready for and this is the next step. And then we're going to talk about what to look for.
Yeah. You want to go?
Yeah, I think for me, so in my situation, my wife and I, we knew each other in high school at a very young age. We weren't together or anything like that. But after we graduated, we were, I think, about 18 going on 19 when we really started to kind of talk and form a friendship. And, obviously a lot of things had transpired before that. We had both been in relationships, whatever they
If
mean.
you want to call that in high school, right.
At that age.
Probably love, Tom.
We have both been involved in relationships that had lasted for a long time. So, even though we were young, and I can speak for myself, there was still a lot that I learned from that experience and took from that, good and bad. And I think that by the time we got to a place where we were kind of like talking and getting to know each other in that way and thinking like there may be a possibility of a relationship here, my mindset had kind of changed. I had been around a lot of women, that were very nice, good looking, all that stuff, and kind of been through that process, but knowing like, man, this is a cool young lady, but just kind of knowing in your heart like, I don't think this is the one yet. And so kind of going through that process and coming to this place where we were still at a young age, my mindset wasn't really like, I feel like I want to get married, but what happened to me was through those experiences, in the interim, God was also doing something inside of me that was changing my heart, that I really came to a place of surrender to him, and a place where my focus was like, man, I've been in some relationships, there's a lot of options out here and stuff like that, but God, I just want you, you know, I just want to know you more. And it wasn't a month or two after I kind of made that firm decision in my heart, then he still brought someone into my life anyway. And God kind of does things like that, right?
Yes.
He likes to do stuff that way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to just do the casual, hey, meet people in the club or wherever and just have these relationships that really, you know, it's not going to, I didn't want to do that. Personally, that was just, I always wanted to be married and have a family and just, you know, get to that. That was always my mindset and my heart growing up. So I had made up my mind that, hey, if I engage on this level, this is going towards, and I wait and feel like, man, God is saying pursue this relationship, that, hey, in my mind, this is going all the way.
So I would say for me, mine was a little different. So my wife and I, we've known each other since we were 12 years old.
Okay.
She grew up around the corner from me. We didn't date until we were 25.
Okay.
And for me, I never thought I was going to get married.
Really?
Right. So I've never seen what I would consider to be a great marriage.
Okay.
I didn't believe you can actually have a great marriage. And so as we start to go through this process, my wife and I, so we had dated before. We broke up. I come to the church. I give myself over to the Lord. And one of the first things I'm looking at, besides the fact that, hey, they didn't ask me for no money here.
Right.
Once we got past that, I'm always looking and I'm like, wow, pastor's wife and elder's wife, they look like they get along. Like, this is my context. I'm not paying attention. I'm actually watching their reaction because I haven't seen it. And so for us, you know, as God started to, for me, it just became surrender. Like, I talked earlier about perspective of how you see people and or how you see women. And for me, you know, I was a college athlete and I'm used to like going to a town and there being a bunch of girls there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is my context and this is where I'm at. But I can remember I had an apartment in San Ramon, a 1-bedroom apartment. And I can remember God giving me like almost like this vision of how much pain and hurt that I had caused.
Wow.
And I can remember just like crying and just really being in my heart like, man, this is like horrible person, not horrible person, but just feeling bad, going through stuff.
Yeah.
And so for me, then I made the decision. It's like, okay, well, I'm done. I'm not sleeping with nobody. I'm going to walk with God. And I don't even know what God's going to do. And so my whole journey was, you know, and me and Antonio, I gave my life to the Lord right around the same time he's going through his journey. So this is actually around the same time. We've known each other that long.
Okay.
But I'm watching him and I'm watching some other guys and I'm going through this whole thing and I'm like, man, if they can be married, then maybe I can. And if they can work it out. And it's like small encouragement because I'm like, what do I have to lose at this time?
Yeah.
I know I'm not going this direction anymore. But there's something in me, Carrie, that's like, man, I don't know if I can walk this celibacy journey out.
Yeah.
Like, if there's any...
Can we keep it real?
I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I'm at the spot where I'm like, man, all the other stuff I was doing, I kind of wanted to get rid of that anyway.
Right.
But this thing
Like,
here...
that ain't serving me anyway.
Right. I don't know if this thing is going to work. So
Yeah.
God just took us on this journey, and it was just really a leap of faith for me because I've never actually seen this. Everything that my wife and I do, I feel like it's setting new ground. I gave my life to the Lord. My wife started going on her journey. And for me, what really happened is we were still friends. She ended up coming back to the church. And I can remember I was serving as an usher. And I looked on one of the TVs and I saw her worshiping. And I don't think I know for a fact she didn't know she was on camera. But for me, there was something in that moment where I can remember thinking, man, like, that's the one. Like, you really need to like put your stake in the ground and you guys need to figure out whatever you need to figure out. But she loves God, you love God. You guys can actually make this work with him. And so that's kind of how the journey went for me.
Okay, so I love how you guys broke it down as far as like what your journey was like. But as you know, you have a single woman or a single guy, and they're looking at this Proverbs 31 as like maybe the standard. Like, what should we do to make sure that we're, you know, staying biblically sound, but as we're like pursuing or being pursued to be a husband or wife?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think the first thing to do is let the standard be the standard.
Okay.
So you got to know what it is, right? So Proverbs 31, you may not be there yet, or you may not understand it, but I think understanding this is God's standard and so this is what we're marching to, I think is key. I think the other thing is being willing to do something His way. So when I start thinking about how my wife and I dated when we were dating, that was a foreign concept to me because I've never dated anybody like that with boundaries and guardrails and rules and prayer and everything else that's there. So allowing God's standard to be His standard, but still leaving room for the fact that if you're a man, fellas, y'all should pursue. You should pursue, right? So you should be clear. Line in the sand.
Come on.
You should pursue.
Yeah.
And then ladies, I think also being willing to, so if I think about Proverbs 31, I think a lot of times, so as women start to prepare and think about marriage, and I do think women probably think at younger ages more about marriage than men. I believe that.
Yes.
But I think as you prepare, understand that there's a place where it's okay to allow somebody to come beside you, even if they may do it differently than you do.
That's key.
So I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm going to turn it over to you. So like there's stuff that my wife allows me to do that I know she doesn't need me to do. Because she was doing all that stuff before we got married.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay.
But she allows me to do it, and that causes me to want to do a better job in it.
Okay.
Because I know that she's allowed me to. And it's vice versa, right? There's stuff that I don't need you to do this. I was doing this before we got married.
Right.
So I think being open to the fact that it's going to look different. I understand the standard, and it's okay that they don't do it exactly how you would do it.
See, that's kind of like the essence of that Proverbs 32. Because I'm like, some stuff I'm like, I'm not a morning person, so I won't get up early and go look for land. But what I will do is stay up late to get it done. You know, like I think there's the balance there. So I love that. I love that. So Antonio, what about you?
Yeah, I think something you just said is key too, because when I look at the Proverbs 31 and even some of those things that it talks about doing from a woman's perspective, like Jarrell said earlier, every household has a different need.
Right.
So I believe that it's also speaking to the will to do it if it's necessary and what's needed, whatever is needed at a given time that you're willing to give it. And that with that heart that God is able to use you in the way that's needed to meet the need of your spouse. So it looks different. It can look different. For guys, when you're looking at this, I think there's a lot of things that we could look at in Proverbs 31 and be like, yeah, she needs to do that. She needs to do that. She needs to do that.
Right.
Oh man, if she's doing that, this is going to be cool.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But how you should really be looking at it is if my wife is conditioning herself to be in a position to do these things that are needed, then I should be looking at it the very same way. Anything that she's going to do, I want to make sure that I can do it too. Marriage is cool. I love it. I love my wife. I love my family. It's a great thing. God created it. It's wonderful, but it's not everything.
Right.
And I think that even as single or people that are not married yet, that has to be in the right perspective. Marriage is something, if you desire it, that's great, but it's not everything. My one and first true love is God,
Amen.
You know, and allowing Him to lead my life and fulfilling my purpose in Him. And I'm telling you, because I've experienced it, He's experienced it. Once our hearts were put in that position that God, I just want to be close to you and I just want you to use me, then He just starts adding stuff. People that were already in our lives for years. Now He says, okay, I'm going to unlock it now. Now's the time. And He does amazing things.
Would you say it comes down to sacrifice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. And that, you know, just being a Christian and walking with God, there's sacrifice involved.
Right.
Just in a relationship with Him. So you can imagine you're dealing with somebody else who isn't perfect. There's going to be a lot more sacrifice involved in trying to align yourselves and come into a relationship.
Yeah. I asked that question because I listened to you and I listened to what Carrie said about, hey, I don't wake up, but I'll stay up late. Well, I think God actually shifts that. And I think part of the point is the fact that you'll be willing to sacrifice.
Yes.
Like if it requires me to stay up to 2 a.m. to make sure that this is done, or if it requires me to wake up at 4 a.m. to get it done, then I'm willing to do it. To me, that's the real heart behind, you know, she wakes up and you know, as far as the land, as far as everything that happened, it's the heart behind it to sacrifice.